2, 1.
Were you gonna? No.
What's
Okay,
up?
good.
What's up, everyone? What's up? Oh, exciting. March 27th, 2024. Thanks for coming live. We got an energetic audience, Pablo, for this
Mhm.
one. Energetic. If you're listening to the recording and have questions and are part of Insider and Club PF, Pablo is in the inside, so you can ask him questions directly. But yeah, thanks for coming. Word of mouth. It's all the chatter today, right, Pablo?
Oh yeah, that's what everyone's talking about. You get
But
it?
it's not enough. It's word of mouth is great. No, don't get me wrong, but is it really enough to sustain long-term growth? You just, rainbows and sunshine, long term. I don't know. I mean, it can be, but it can also lead you into something bigger, better, and more different. So I'm going to turn it over to Pablo. He's given us an hour, more than an hour, because he made a custom presentation for you all, which you did not have to do. But he made an awesome presentation all about how to gain more trust, build a bigger community, make more money, thanks to word of mouth, but specifically movement building. So, Pablo, the show is yours.
All the things, baby. Mark, thank you for having me, man. As you know, I was completely going to just give you a keynote that I have prepared for next month. And last night I decided to completely rewrite this thing because when I get in a room full of marketers of your level, I get massive imposter syndrome. So I'm going to give you a disclaimer. I'm not a slide creator. I'm not a presentation maker, but I think I can deliver a good message here. So bear with me on the design and all this good stuff. But like Mark said, Mark, when he first reached out to me, he said, I want you to create a presentation on movement making. And I immediately cowered. I said, well, what about word of mouth? But no, I decided to really challenge myself about how to take this word of mouth thing into a movement, because all the marketers that I want to hang out with are focused on creating movements. And we all know that if we're going to do it, we need to create a community of people on a mission to something, right? But before that starts to pay off, we need to create short-term wins in order to sustain it, to sustain the investment in this movement, in this thing that we are doing. And that's why I focus on word of mouth, because word of mouth can be something that you can accelerate in a like a quarter time span kind of thing, and you can measure its results. And if you can show these indicators that word of mouth is working and you tailor it towards this like movement methodology, now you got a chance to stay in it for the long game. And the only reason why I'm qualified to talk to you about this is because, let me see if this is working. Well, okay, so in 2020, we drove $32 million worth of revenue from 30 miles in 1 year. And what I mean by that is we created this show that by the end of it, by the end of year one, we generated 40 million bucks off of this new digital channel that was a community play. And when we looked back at it, we realized that those 40 million, 80% of them were attributed back to 30 people that were either upgrading, increasing their lifetime value themselves, referring us new people, getting on the phone with prospects that weren't sure. We could trace 80% of that 40 million back to 30 mouths. And ever since then, we've leaned into it and we've turned it into this vibrant community where we're hosting events and we're doing all this good stuff. And now that I'm in, 4 years later, I'm looking back and I'm seeing the things that turned it into a movement, the way that I'm seeing other movements happen in similar methodologies across the go-to-market world, which we're going to talk about today, all have something in common, which is something that I'm calling experiential content marketing. And what I mean by experiential content marketing is the design and delivery of events that are created specifically with the co-creation of content with not just the people that you're inviting to be stars of the event, not just the people that are invited to be on stage, but also with a deliberate set path for the audience to get to that stage and be part of the co-creation of that content and a plan for how you're going to distribute that afterwards. So that's what I mean by experiential content marketing. It's not just events, it's events made to co-create content with your audience first in mind, right? Not a giant event, not just for a good time, for co-creation of content and for that experience. And I'm going to explain to you what I mean by that. But first, let me tell you how I got here. About 9 years ago, my brother passed away, and at his funeral, 1,200 people showed up. And as I looked around this Catholic church that I had been a part of forever, and quite frankly, since I was about 14, was like half 1 foot in, 1 foot out. I looked around and I thought, man, this isn't just like my religion. This is my community. And these people really supported us for the last 2 years while he was battling cancer. And they're really supporting us now. And this is so valuable that I could never leave this community. And for whatever reason, people say that in I think it's like in times of great pain comes great clarity. My brain switched to, oh my God, this just solved for churn. And there's a business case here for this whole like community model thing. And ever since then, I've been on this mission. I've been on this mission for like 9 years to prove community creation as a viable tool for business development. Lucky for me, I had spent the last 8 years in Miami building these little communities, these young professional groups for charities. And I had one trick to form these things. I had created 4 of these, and there was one trick. When we started forming them, I'd recruit people by saying, hey, Miami's a flaky city. If you want to meet people that care at least a little bit about something else other than themselves, join this group. And oh, by the way, when we host our meetings, we host them in the boardroom of somebody that's on the board of directors. So you get to meet the director and you get to grow a relationship with him for about 20, 25 minutes to tell you about his career. And then we plan our happy hour, we plan our volunteer event, we plan our fundraiser. And I realized that trick, which then got me on the boards of all these different charities, I started using that trick to recruit young professionals into the groups. Then I started getting really connected with all the directors. And I started using that trick to get friends of the directors, influential people in town that weren't on these boards, to host events for the charity itself. And then eventually I got so connected that I started using the people that I had met in all these events and all these different things to do business development for my construction company that was a hospital builder, university park builder. I'd approach a developer and say, oh, hey, I know what you're doing is transit-oriented development. There's a politician on the board of one of my charities that cares about public transportation. Let's host an event about how important this is for the board, for the young professionals of Miami. And boom, I'd be backdooring like $60 million contracts. And as I was doing this thing and graduated into business development from just green building construction guy, I started listening to the Gary Vee Experience. This is 2017. And I started thinking, oh man, what this guy is doing by taking these keynotes and having people ask him questions and then repurposing it for Instagram and for YouTube and all these different things is not unsimilar to what I'm doing. It just has scale because there's content. And I just didn't shut up about this thing until I got the opportunity to leave Miami and test my thesis in a small startup up here in Jacksonville for e-commerce sellers, for Amazon retail arbitrage people. And I got there, it was a dumpster fire, right? Like the code wasn't really working. The head developer quit. The CEO had just gotten a ripoff report. I just partnered with this guy and I just quit my job a week before. But I said, you know what? I'm gonna go to work here. And what I did was in early 2018, I saw that our 12 highest paying customers made up 30% of our recurring revenue. And we were churning customers like crazy. So I was like, we can't lose these folks. I started doing an every other week Zoom call where we would show up, give them a little bit of value, record the call, and then let them commiserate and give each other advice. And soon they all kind of became best friends. Then we hosted an event down in Panama where we took them down and we had them present their businesses to us. We took what we learned from their business and turned it into a class because each person did something really, really well. So we turned it into this class, packaged it, sold it for $5,000 a pop. That led to our first like big cash windfall and like stabilizing of things. 6 months later, we created an event where we put them as the main speakers to come meet them. And in a year, we had completely solved for this like brand crisis, churn crisis that we had because we were using the content in our funnels to bring people to a community that then graduates to an event where they meet these people that are in our advertising. And at the end of year 1, I thought, man, I proved my thesis, but I don't really want to build this business. I'm going to go continue this mission of community creation for business development. It took me about a year to productize that thing. That's when I met JWB, which we're going to talk about this case study of the $40 million in 1 year in the community that we've built called the Not Your Average Investor Show. And now I was just telling Mark, man, like, I don't know if y'all know who Mark Schaefer is, but like he wrote about me in his book. I'm a case study in his book. I've been written about in The Ultimate Sales Machine. And I just have like this like massive, like, I don't know, I was a construction guy 5 years ago, but I've just been chasing this thing. And I want to share, this is my latest thinking. This is what I've the latest thing. I literally like congealed all of this last night, and let's talk about this Not Your Average Investor Show experience, right? So this is a $150 million company where what it's called is turnkey rental property investing. They've been on the front page of the Wall Street Journal twice before I got there. And what they have figured out is how to give somebody a cash flowing rental property that they find, that they either build or remodel, sell it to the person, and then they are the property managers. They give you a portfolio manager that manages the whole experience, and they grow a single family workforce housing rental income portfolio for you in the most passive way possible, right? And Greg's thing was, man, we've grown this company for 16 years, but we still can't, we're not having a good, we're not having any luck getting people from the internet to do business with us. Our number one channel is this one like real estate educator that we're paying super, super high commissions to. And I need to diversify from that. I need to find a way to market this thing online. And this was end of 2019, right? So I was like, all right, let's do this show, kind of like what we did at Ecom. We're going to show up once a week. We ended up started doing it twice a week, where we're going to talk to attractive figures, people that have, and that are experts in real estate, people that are experts in the local economy about why it's so good to invest in Jacksonville, people on your team, yourself, teach people, educate. The moment that we find somebody that's super active in this, we're going to bring the clients up on stage. We're going to interview them. We're going to make stars out of them. It's going to lead to a community. We're going to repurpose all the content, blah, 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 blah. And he was like, that's crazy, man. But at the end of the day, nobody had a better idea. So he gave me a shot. And that's what happened. By the end of year one, we were having a fan appreciation show where 12 clients came on back to back to back talking about, man, this is so valuable to me. I feel like I'm a part of a community. This is why I do business with JWB. That quarter was the biggest quarter that they've ever had. When we did the study, we realized this whole idea of like 30 people drove this thing. We went from having 1,200 online leads and 22 deals closed from online leads to 680 online leads and 60 deals closed from online leads, right? It created this like social validation that allowed people to understand what this was without having to be educated by somebody else that they paid $25,000 to. As soon as that started working, I was like, man, the world's starting to open up. We need to get people together. These folks that you see on the bottom left, Drew, Jen, and her husband, Renee, were in Atlanta one time. They got together. They sent us a picture. Then they came down to Jacksonville to hang out with us. We started doing these like little events. We started talking at real estate seminars, Greg and I, and then eventually hosted a small event, like 25 people in Jacksonville. Then next year it was like 50 people in Jacksonville and sold 3 homes. This last year, year 4, we had a 125 person 2-day event that sold out in a week and had a 50 person waiting list. And most importantly, what's happened is 35% of their new client acquisitions come from people that have shown up to one of our experiential content marketing experiences, whether it's the show or the event, and bought a property within 30 days of interacting with that. So that is a small target window. 35% of their revenue is coming from people that within 30 days came to one of these events. Closing on a house takes about 22 days. Right. So we made the target as small as possible. This is not accounting for the footprint on YouTube. This is not accounting for the footprint on social media. We're just attributing 35% influence, super direct, for this movement of people that call themselves not your average investors, that have turned into this community that's become this like giant social validation exercise. And in these 4 years, what I have realized is that there's a real pattern recognition. There's no more just, hey, Gary Vee talking about being the digital mayor and doing it. In 2019, I went to Funnel Hacking Live and I saw Russell Brunson from ClickFunnels doing a very similar thing. He had this giant event and people on stage were all people that had succeeded with his product, and he was giving them these like golden records awards and making heroes out of them, right? Like it was and having him on his podcast and having them on his content stream, right? He was sharing the stage with them. Then Sangram Vajra with Flip My Funnel. He's done the same exact thing, right? Like started these like flip my funnel events, then built a community off of it, has a super successful podcast that people from the community come out on the podcast and do all this type of stuff and have these events that they gather around. And then the latest one that I was like, oh man, Jesus, like seriously, is Chris Walker was doing this one-to-one, right? Like Zoom call where people were showing up week after week, becoming friends with each other. People got semi-famous, got good jobs based on being part of that community. There's people in there. I know their names just because they contributed so much, and they know my names because they contributed so much, right? He built this community as well using the same exact thing. This playbook is out there. And to be very honest, like I'm shocked that such few people are doing this. You see a smattering of people doing this. I know Proof Point Marketing is starting to do something like this. I know that it's like Gold something. They're like a virtual event platform. They do something like this, but you see very few companies doing this like digital live event, pairing it with in-person events. If you look at what Club PF is, it's very similar to this playbook, right? Like this is doable. And you're just starting to see it everywhere. And to me, what these things are doing really, really well is that they're getting the right words into the right mouths around a watering hole, right? Which are these experiential content marketing activations. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about this idea of the words. I am obsessed with category design. I know that there's a lot of misnomers out there about category design. People are like, really? Do we need more words? Do we need more people to call something this? Isn't it like making fetch happen? The way that I explain category design is the idea of centering everything around a problem, not your product, not your brand, not your big idea, but the problem itself. And to me, this is the category design is that created into like an industrial framework for influence. And the reason why I think this idea of starting with the problem first is because just in a natural setting, you never really start a conversation with anybody. All you can do is enter the conversation happening in their head, right? So if you show up as somebody that is in the conversation in their head, then you have this chance to get them to go along with whatever you're saying. You have this chance to influence them, and entering through a problem that they identify, that you bring forth to them, that you take from being non-obvious to obvious, or again, taking a obvious problem and taking a non-obvious solution and making it obvious. That is the entry point for influence with anybody I've ever met, from like a personal level to anything else, any kind of like leader of a movement, anything like that, right? So let's talk about how you create that. This is the category design formula, which I learned from my friends at the Category Design Advisors, Kevin Maney and Mike Damphouse. And it's this idea that if you start with the context, with a shift in context, and then you go into, hey, because these things changed, now there's this problem. Now there's this thing missing. It requires an idea, an innovation, something to solve it, right? So I put the context here in all caps because that is where you really, really got to nail it. If you can't walk into the conversation empathizing with where your client, where the person that you're talking to, where your boss is already thinking, and you're describing their life as it is to them, and it makes sense and you get them agreeing, then you have a chance to be like, okay, because I know where you're coming from, I know where the problem is for where you're trying to get. And then you get a chance for the innovation, for the big idea, which you can name a category if you like. And then the idea is to put it into a point of view, right? The point of view is the narrative around this problem, around this thing. This formula I took from John Ruggie. And the POV is very simple. Is you start with how the world is, the problem with it, the symptoms of the problem, a new way of doing things, and then the new world. And what that looked like for JWB is we knew that people wanted to invest in real estate. We had all these stats around the fact that if you ask most Americans, the number one thing that they say is wealth that will build wealth is real estate. But then you ask what they're invested in, and real estate is in the top 3, right? So like that's what the world looks like. The world wants to invest in real estate. What's missing is an easy way to invest in real estate without being an expert in it and without being a plumber and blah, 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 blah. So the innovation is, how do you create a company that is vertically integrated from like the acquisition of the asset all the way through the life, the life of it and the returns and helping you manage that, that solves that thing, right? So that was the category formula. And as we've continued, it's evolved, right? Now we have these statistics around Americans are not able to retire, right? Like the average American is reaching retirement age with less than $500,000 in savings. They're unable to replace 50% of their income when they reach 65. That means that they're not retiring. They're having to continue to work, and to make things worse, we're getting older. We're living to 100, right? The problem with that is that the way that we've been taught to invest is this idea of like investing in these like high growth stocks and things like that, so that at a certain age, you put it in this really conservative like bond stuff that creates cash flow for you. So you go from growth to cash flow. And then once you're there, you can't take risks with it. And it's not really going to grow. It's just meant to like spout off money off of the thing that you've already built. And at the end of the day, that is how most of us are investing, but real estate doesn't work that way. What if you could have a cash growth portfolio that continues to grow and continues to give you better options as you get older? Even in retirement, you actually don't have to be as risk averse, because this thing is continuing to grow and continue to grow in cash flow, which is what you need to retire. And that you can do through real estate. And if you do it through real estate, now, as you get older, you have more options, blah, 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 blah. That's the new world. That's the use cases, right? So that's what's really evolved for us as a point of view. But here's the important thing. Instead of focusing on this idea of, am I nailing the name of my category? Notice I haven't set a category there, right? Like we've messed around with cash growth portfolios. We've messed around with like vertically integrated investing, blah, 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 blah. None of that has really hit. But what really hits for people is the other pieces of this thing, right? This like current state of the world, this problem with it, this ramification, the future states, all this stuff are things that we're seeing them repeat word for word, the way we say it: vertical integration, cash growth portfolio, not an average investor, right? Like all this type of stuff. And here's your shout out, Joe. I was talking with Joe Zabak about this in Nashville recently, and we came to this aha that the category name is like the name of the movie that you're going to watch. But these words, these cast of words, these terms, these sentences, the way that you describe things, these are the one-liners that you repeat from the movie, right? Like I was just talking to Mark about Ace Ventura, and how I'm always repeating lines from Ace Ventura, right? I rarely say the movie Ace Ventura, but you bet your ass I'm like, oh, righty then, like it's those things that stick, that you're able to get people to say. And if you're getting people to say that, that's the word of mouth that happens at scale. Those are the words that will catch on, that will create this like flywheel of goodness that happens. I was just talking to James Carberry from Sweetfish Media, who, by the way, has been category king of B2B podcasting already. He tried designing this category called content-based networking. And he never really felt like that really caught on, content-based networking, even though his business caught on, right? Like he is probably the only guy I know doing really well with B2B podcasting. But as he's designing this new category around owned media and servicing owned media, he's focused much less on the category name as much as the problem, the villain, which he's calling commodity content. And what he's realized is that when he came up with commodity content, that thing has caught on way more than any other thing that he had created around content-based networking. He's seeing it in people's slides. People are posting about it on social media because he hit at the vein of the problem, right? So you're looking for all these one-liners, but the number one-liner that you really, really want to hit is phrasing the problem the way that somebody sees it, better than they can say it themselves, because he or she who can state the problem the best will be known to have the solution. Mark, I know that when we were talking about this stuff, you wanted to talk about this idea of the villain and the value of the villain. You got anything on this?
It's super important. I mean, this is so fundamental. So I've been fortunate to be part of two category creating, movement making companies, HubSpot and Drift. You could say maybe a third with Airmeet, but HubSpot. Everyone knows HubSpot for what, Pablo? What is HubSpot known for?
Inbound marketing.
Inbound marketing. And so you think, right, the problem is outbound marketing, right? Because they positioned it like, well, the old way is outbound marketing. The new way, the category is inbound marketing. But no, Pablo, that's not the problem at the end of the day. You know what the problem really is, though, or was, and it still is today, but like back in 2008, 2009, what the problem was? You remember those days?
Outbound sales wasn't working.
Outbound sales. What is outbound sales though? What does it do to you as a person?
It burns you out.
It burns you out. It interrupts you.
Mm,
It interrupts you. The problem was people were sick and tired of being interrupted.
yeah. Interruption marketing.
And yeah, and so they put a label to it because
Yeah.
it was I think in their case outbound, inbound, it rhymes. It's the black, white, whatever. But like
Yeah.
the actual fundamental problem when they thought about the product design, how they built the product and the solutions, which is blogging, content, etc. It's like how do we help people not be interrupted as much, and how do they get educated and use content as a mechanism to create some type of relationship, trust, and we use the magnet of pulling them inbound into our funnel versus pushing outbound interruptive based marketing on them.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, okay, that's one. Go ahead.
Yeah, that hits, right? Like nobody likes to be interrupted. Nobody likes to be spammed. So people are like, okay, there's got to be a better way, right?
Exactly. So they phrased it as the current state of the world is here's all these things creating interruption. They're interrupting your life. So that's the problem. The ramifications is it's not working as well anymore because everyone's doing this crap. Remember how bad robocalls were at that point? All this junk mail. It was spam everywhere, right? What's the new way? Inbound. HubSpot's example. Drift's example, conversational marketing. People think the problem is forms. No, the problem, it was form to some degree. What is the real problem, though, when it comes to a form or comes to anything with really a website? Friction. So the current state of the world is you try to get a hold of someone or get a question answered via a website. It is painful. Yeah. It still is today. Pretty painful, quite honestly. It's getting better. But the forms were the poster villain, 100%. The real problem, though, when you thought about from like a buyer standpoint and a marketer standpoint, is friction is creating a massive drag on the efficiency of your go-to-market. Form is the thing creating the friction, though. So it's like it's usually like a couple things you have to kind of unpack, and then to your point, which one lands better? In Drift's case, form has landed better. In HubSpot's case, outbound landed better than interruption.
Yeah.
I just I'll pause there.
And I've talked to you about this before. You didn't have this all on day one, right? Like these were iterations that you hit based on interactions with the market.
100%. Like so, commodity content. I love that. The one that we're going all in on right now, and you're going to hear me say this a lot more because I've been validating it, is generic GTM.
Cool.
So anyway, we'll pause there. If you guys have questions or thoughts about this, Pablo and I would love to riff and rap with you on this, because to me, this is how you move from word of mouth to movement making and how you operationalize word of mouth. I'll turn it back to you, Pablo.
All right, cool. I'm going to land this plane with this. So again, we're looking for this cast of words, and you are iterating through this cast of words to see which one of these. The important thing is to have it in mind when you're hearing people repeat it, which one of these different parts of the cast it is, right? And then, so we talked about the words. Now we're going to talk about the mouths. And this is probably my ugliest slide yet, but you know what? It gets attention. So at the bottom line is the mouths got to go from an attractive figure to a super consumer. And I'm going to break down what each of these is, right? This is Penn and Teller. Has everybody heard of Penn and Teller, right? One of the most successful magic acts ever. Had HBO specials, have shows, blah, 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 blah. Did you know that the secret to Penn and Teller's success, their word of mouth, comes from the fact that after every show, they're in the lobby greeting everybody. It's not a VIP experience. They just do it with everybody. They let everybody just come up close to them, shake their hand, come see who they are, and then they go tell their friends, right? So this is an old trick of just like giving people access to the attractive figure. Really, really works for word of mouth. And these experiential content marketing scenarios are, the attractive figure has to be either somebody that is really knowledgeable, really accomplished in the way that in the thing that people are trying to understand, people are trying to achieve. It could be the CEO of the company, it could be a chief evangelist, and they also have to be really welcoming, right? So like sometimes it works really, really well with a pair. When you look at Demand Gen Live, it was Chris Walker and Megan Bowen. People really sleep on the role of Megan Bowen in that execution, but she was the one that was like super welcoming, set the table, and Chris Walker was this like attractive figure that everybody wanted to talk to because he was so smart in the way he said things. We set up the same exact thing with Greg Cohen and this idea of the attractive figure. I'm not sure if this audio is going to play, but like this is a couple of our super consumers talking about access to the attractive figure.
Kind of hear it.
Even access to you on the show, we're sending stuff on the chat and Pablo edit some of it, makes it presentable and PG, but I just love what, the community is really all about family, right? I mean, this whole group has the same mentality, has the same mindset, no matter who you talk to, no matter how many times you talk to them, and everybody, when you talk to them new, you're like, you already know them, like if you're coming in and saying, I finally get to meet you, but it feels like we know each other.
Yeah, it's a little quiet.
All right, so I put the subtitles on there. Anyways, that's them saying, listen, access to the CEO, this is what we come here for. Like, what kind of company is this, like open and honest, and getting to know you guys makes us feel like we are, like that we're family and we really, really trust you, right? So it's like this idea of getting in front of getting the people that are really interested in the problem to get in close contact with the person who's most solving the problem is really, really important. So you got to figure out who your attractive character is, be it the CEO, be it a chief evangelist, and whether it's going to be a one person or a duo that is, like the 1-2 punch of like very welcoming, set the table and expertise, or vice versa, right? So you see this in all of this. You see it in the Chris Walker thing. You see it in the Gary Vee thing. You see it in the Russell Brunson thing. You see it in the Sangram thing. I don't know how that counts here in Club PF. Who's the really welcoming expert and who's the other guy, Mark and Nick? I'm just kidding. So the next thing is, the next thing is to the people that you want to interact the most with, that you want to not just give access to the attractive character, but also show a clear path to the stage itself to be on, like to be highlighted, is the super consumer. Super consumers is a concept by Eddie Yoon, who's one of the category pirates, where he's essentially got all this data that shows that when you look across many businesses, 80% of revenue often comes from 10% of the clientele, right? Like they're the most profitable ones. They're the ones that they really, really want to sell to. And in digital business, it's even more exaggerated. It's like 0.1, it's like 1% of the clientele provides 80% of the profitability, not revenue, the profitability. And that's what he coins a super consumer. So that was part of the whole methodology in this execution as well. It's the same methodology in ClickFunnels, very similar to what Peak Community is doing and what Sangram has done, and with the GTM partners and what, the execution that they're doing. And even in DGL, right? Like I know the names of many people that became regulars on DGL because they would become a recurring cast of characters that would support the community, and they would also become like semi-famous within the circle. I'm not going to play this thing, but this is a clip of essentially them saying, oh man, it was crazy being at the event. People wanted to take pictures with us and people wanted to meet us. And, people when they're in Baltimore, Atlanta, they come drive to meet us. And I tell them very clearly, that's because we deliberately knew that we had to turn you guys into stars in order for this community to work, right? So this elevation, this like intentful action through the experiential content marketing of showing the super consumer and showing to other super consumers that if you care enough about this problem, we're going to promote you too, is a big part of this thing, along with the words themselves, because they're your evangelists, right? Like a community, a movement goes from like one chief evangelist to like 8 to 12 apostles. And then from there, the message spreads, right? It's not unlike the original religious metaphor. This is how communities work too. You need to go from being Superman to forming the Avengers, because it's the Avengers where you start to reach scale. And then once you have that going on, then it's about these watering holes, right? Like how can you get somewhere where the attractive figure, the super consumers, and prospects, people in the periphery, all interact together through this experiential content marketing activation stuff, right? So just to frame it, experiential content marketing in a digital form is exactly this: the live show where you are bringing on experts, you're giving out your opinions, you're allowing people to interact. I'll never forget, like a year and a half in, the first time that I did a show without Greg, him and his partners were watching it on Zoom, and they're like, holy shit, what is happening in the chat? When we're live in the Zoom call, it's like us giving this content, but the chat is going off. It's just like, oh, hey, how you been? Blah, 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 blah. People making friends with each other, just going left and, like talking to each other. They know each other. They have nicknames for each other, all these different things. It was the same thing at DGL. So this is an experience, right? Like, and this ability to like think of it as an experiential content experience where you're thinking, how can I get people involved? How can I promote them to the top? How can I use this content in my marketing afterwards? That is the first thing that you want to be thinking about strategically when you're creating these events, these digital events, not just who's the famous speaker that can talk to you and how many people can I get there, right? That's the switch in the mentality. Then after that, you can, by the way, you're seeing this like super fancy execution, right? Because we're like in a studio and blah, 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 blah. Anybody can do this. With the script and one virtual assistant, you can do this. We have a team of 4 virtual assistants, which leads to about $5,000 a month in payroll for me that can execute this for up to 5 companies, right? It's not a lot of payroll for one company to do it internally if you have the person dedicated to it, the expert, and the virtual assistant that can use the script and can do all these different tasks. It's doable for under $1,000 a month. And I know this because my buddy Mike Grissell, Big Mike, he's an engineer. He's a 7-person engineer firm. His whole team is in India. He does this, right? Like he does these like live shows, goes to trade shows and does this thing. And we helped him set this thing up and execute. And him and his guy Mithun from India do this on a weekly basis at trade shows and do this like digital experiential content marketing stuff. And it's working for him, right? Like 1 year in, it's already showing big, big, big results for him and his civil engineering company that sells to Colorado and Texas and the West Coast, right? So this is B2B as well. Then there is the in-person stuff, right? Like this is another one of our clients, Rockway Exhibits and Events. We went to the trade show about the trade show industry. And in his booth, we set up a podcast to do this thing live. And we did it the same exact way. How do we just create these experiences where we're co-creating content with experts, with people we want to highlight, with folks that we want to bring closer to the center of the sun. And this thing went so well at that thing last year that they invited us this year to talk about it and teach it as a class. So it went incredibly well, but you don't even need to do it at a trade show. You can just do it in a bar with an extra room adjacent to the trade show, which is what we did this year because we didn't exhibit. We just did it there. And it's what I was doing when I was doing these charity events. Like there's so many places that have extra space on a Sunday night that you just get 20 people there, an attractive figure, someone to speak to, and you just produce this like panel that you would see like at a big event, but you just do it at a small scale. And the reason why it still works is because you're making the content around it, right? Like if it's experiential content marketing, not just an event, it can scale and all you need is 10, 20 people in a small room and it feels great. This was done with a camera and with an iPhone camera and a couple of like lavalier mics from this company called MOUE. All you need is to create an event schedule, to know who your speaker schedule is, and have your production and distribution team that, again, could be VAs. But for this type of stuff, I suggest getting a camera guy. So, and then, as you do it, you start with like the 5-person, 10-person, 20-person, and it goes, right? Like this is the series of events for us at the Not Your Average Investor show community movement. It was Drew, Jen, and Renee that met for dinner one time. Then they came down to Jacksonville. I met them for dinner. Then Jen hosted a small gathering in her house in Monterey, California. That dude with a face mask wasn't a client, but he showed up because he was a fan of the show. 30 days later, he was investing. Then we hosted the following year in Jacksonville. We had 50 people show up. And then now following year, year 4, we have 125 people show up, 50-person waiting list. And it's a thing, right? Like now next year, we're thinking about a 500-person event because this thing sold out so quickly. We didn't even get a chance to market it, right? But it's just a matter of getting those experiential content marketing experiences going where you can combine now the podcast, right? The digital experiential content marketing with the in-person experiential content marketing, but you just got to treat it as attractive figure, interacting to identify super consumers, trying to figure out what that cast of characters in the category design formula and point of view is, repeating it till you start seeing it happen, identify the super consumer, bring him on stage, promote that as part of your marketing and your content and the things that you're doing, rinse and repeat, do it at your live events, create live events whenever you're going places. I'm doing this stuff whenever I travel. I will look to do this by myself, right? Like it's not that hard to have your own podcast where you're doing this on a weekly basis. And then when you go somewhere, like you go to Chicago, I look up my network on LinkedIn and I said, hey, I'm going to do like a tea tasting event at the Drake, and whoever wants to come can come. 10 people show up. We do a thing with my buddy Raj. Like these are things that I've done. It doesn't take a lot to do it with one person. You can absolutely do it within your company and however you're executing it. You just need to think about it this way. Outsource to virtual assistants, run the program, and just like have in mind this formula of the words, the mouths, and the watering holes. And the last thing that I'm going to say is just, why word of mouth? Right? Like just let's get beyond the movement thing. Let's just talk about this idea of word of mouth thing. In the 60s, we were seeing 76 ads per day. 2007, we're seeing 96 ads per day. Now the estimates are we're seeing 4,000 to 10,000 ads per day, right? Like this interruption marketing, what Mark was just talking about, it's insane, right? Like how are we going to break through this noise? How are we going to like outcompete people with the bigger budgets? How can we challenge brands? And it's by creating this word of mouth, right? Like there's crazy statistics about how over 80% of businesses believe that 60% of their business comes from word of mouth, but only 20% of them actually have a program for it. So, this to me is the giant ball that people haven't figured out how to actually attack. Right. And that to me means it's the big opportunity. So whether it is you think about my framework with this like experiential content marketing and doing it this way, you got to think of something because this is the big opportunity. Because at the end of the day, business is a very simple equation. Cost of client acquisition plus your cost of operations has to be less than or equal to your lifetime value. And this is what word of mouth looks like when you look across that, right? This is a financial advisor that we did that works with doctors. We did a very similar execution, Zoom show with a podcast, and try to show up at live events and stuff like that. This is our most meager results. This is our these are our lowest numbers that we did year 1 to year 2. He went from 345 leads with 30 referred, 66 new contracts, to 316 leads, 45 referred, 76 new contracts, right? So less leads, more revenue. And the reason why less leads, more revenue is important is because of that equation, right? Like this is what you need to be seeing. And the experiential content, the experiential content marketing event is the thing that you measure it to. Did the person come to this and how much revenue came from it? You should start seeing less leads lead to more revenue. And this is what we saw at the end of year 1 with JWB. It was insane. It was Q1 was like 1,100, like 20 leads that came from the website, and they closed around like 27 new deals. These are properties. These are $150,000 properties that they're selling. By the end of Q4, they were getting around 600 something leads coming in from the website and close to 70 deals being closed from that funnel, right? That is less leads, more revenue. And what that does, that word of mouth actually drives down cost of client acquisition, increases LTV, and keeps operations constant. There is no other channel that will do this. This is the big opportunity. Find a way to stoke that, find a way to measure it, and go for it. It'll change your career. That's it.
Pablo, give me a round of applause, people. This is just, coming right at you. Fresh paint, right? I mean, fresh shaven, fresh paint.
Yeah.
No, wait. So questions, he's got some time to answer any questions you have in the chat. I have an observation.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't use, I don't think, we can look at the transcript to make sure. I don't think you used the word education or educate once.
You're right.
But I would argue, so that's an observation. Here's the question. I would argue that's over half the battle of everything you just talked about. Agree or disagree?
Um, yes, I think the content that comes out of it, like the experience for the experiential content marketing and the content that comes out of it has to either educate, inspire, or entertain. And to me, education is kind of like the thing that is most tangible that people show up for.
Okay. I'm just curious because I feel like education and educates, maybe education more so than educate, is not a, people don't like that word, especially in B2B. Like, I don't want to be educated. But
Yeah.
at the end of the day, that's what great content is. Like when you talk about commoditized content is generic, crappy content because it doesn't do one of those three things you just mentioned.
Yeah.
But it definitely probably doesn't educate.
Yeah.
And for someone to really say, whoa, I'm now going to take something that I've learned about and now understand enough to then act and master it.
Yeah.
That's education, right? Like a mastery model that I've used in the past is learn, understand, master. You got to first teach to learn, but to really understand it, you got to do it. And to master it, you got to become the teacher. And I think that's basically what you're saying as part of this process, because you have these people that come onto stage that have mastered it to some degree and are, you know, still the student, but like now they're becoming the teacher and teaching others. So this is an observation.
Listen, I 100% agree with what you're saying. The only reason why I reserve space for the other ones is because I've also seen it work the other way, right? Like Liquid Death is not educating anybody on you know, environmental resources or whatever, but they're entertaining as shit and people pay attention to their content and they're doing that stuff, right? So like when I went to the 10X conference for Grant Cardone, I call that like Metallica arena concert had a baby with a Mexican flea market. It was just like fireworks and talk and blah 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 and sell you, right? Like that, if you do that enough, if you create enough of a spectacle and people have the attention, people will continue to come and be there, right? So like entertainment plays, inspiration also plays, but I think the most accessible thing to us in the B2B world, in the business world, is education, right? Because everybody out here that's doing business is trying to reach some kind of objective in their life. And if you can show them a better way, if you can teach them how to do something that'll make their day better, that'll make them more profitable or whatnot, that's absolutely an avenue to do it. And I think it's the one that's most accessible to most people, because not most people aren't comedians, most people aren't inspirational speakers, most people aren't that, but people are, you know, care about their craft and want to share it with others.
Well, it's like the holy trinity you just created, right? You get education, the entertainment, and the inspiration. You know, it's the holy trinity, right?
Well, I mean, I'm going for it, bro. I want to be the
It's-
five-tool athlete out here.
Love it. Folks, if you have any questions for Pablo, like let him know. We can take you off mute even if you're, you know, just want to raise your hand. But I mean, I learned a ton. I mean, so many great examples, so many just great ways to think about the framing of how to get to the thing that's gonna resonate, because that's ultimately the unlocking piece, I think. Would you agree?
Yeah, totally. Well, listen, man, I think the unlocking piece is short-term victories on the way to a long-term goal, right? Like, so to me, this idea of like these content experiences, right? It's so daunting to think I need to throw an event and I need to get 100 people there. It's much less daunting to think I need to throw an event and get 10 people there and create some really, really good content that's going to be useful for me, right? Like if you can go, people have much more capacity to spearfish than they do to like cast wide nets and get some fish on the boat, right? So like to me, it's that like how can you intersect the person that you want to be guilty by association with, the person that most admires you in your business, and the person that most you want to believe that they should admire you in their in your business, in the smallest room possible. Like if you can get that stuff to work, whether it's digital or in person, then you can start compounding off of that, right? And then like and then use that for content beyond that.
So smart. I
Thanks,
think we're
man.
good with questions. I mean, you know, if people know where to find you, where just make sure though, where do they find you? Just let them know.
Oh, if you look up Pablo Gonzalez on the internet, you're just gonna find me. I'm the only one. LinkedIn, I'm connected to Mark. Be the stage.live is my company. You know, like I feel like most of the people that are here, I feel like I know. I'm like 1 degree of separation here, and I'm super pumped that you're here.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
Well, thank you again, Pablo. We will we will do what you said, which is make sure that this goes wide and far. So.
Yeah, I mean, listen, you guys are doing it, right? Like you invited me onto this stage to then like have me be able to like promote people to be here that are going to want to be in Club PF and are already in Club PF, and we're creating valuable content that adds to people's lives, and they want to be close to you because you're an attractive character, and now they also see me as a super consumer and want to get close to me. Like it is the playbook. Like you guys are doing it. Everybody that's building a community online right now has some form of this, right? Like it's about like tying in this plus live events and like doing it purposefully over time and like using that content strategically to influence people.
I love it. I love it. And Chetan, yes, start doing it. Act, right? Like don't overthink it. I mean, just act, right, Pablo? There's nothing better than just jumping in.
Yeah, man. Chetan Bot saying more than questions. I'm just going to start doing it. Was planning to hold a meet for user research, but we'll turn that into a live podcast. Let's go, bro. Do it. That's it. Just start doing it. You're gonna see signals of it, right? Like it's gonna, whether or not it leads to something or it leads to an insight or whatnot, like you're gonna start seeing signals from doing this activity, and then just like be very purposeful about like landing on those words, figuring out who's like super into it, and then king making them.
Giddy up, folks. Giddy up. Thank you, Pablo.
Let's go. See you, bud.
Peace.